Hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for joining us for the B2E Innovation Fund Showcase. My name is Mariko Makashu. I'm the program manager for B2E, the Building to Electrification Coalition. I'm also joined by my colleague Peter Sun, who's also going to be hosting this session with me. I just wanted to let you know that we are recording this meeting as a webinar, and we will be posting it online afterwards. So if you don't want your face shown, then I just encourage you to turn off your camera and stay muted, but you'll be able to connect with the presenters and the other participants in the chat. I'd like to start off this showcase in a good way. And I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I'm joining today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I would like to express my gratitude to the original caretakers and stewards of these lands that I live, work, and play on. If you're joining from another territory, I would recommend that you add that into the chat. So just to start us off, this program, the B2E Innovation Fund Showcase, as part of the Zero Emissions Innovation Center. At ZEEC, we are a leading hub for urban decarbonization in Metro Vancouver and beyond. We accelerate and scale climate action innovation within BC in the building, transportation, and renewable energy sectors. And B2E itself is a BC-based coalition, which has over 250 organizational members and a lot more individuals who are involved. B2E sees electrification as a critical pathway to achieve deep, immediate, and real emissions reductions. We launched this first in Canada coalition in late 2021. In order to coordinate actions, encourage collaboration, and facilitate networking to accelerate the pace of building electrification in this province. So today's agenda, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction on the fund, myself and Peter. Then you're going to hear from 4 presenters. We've got 4 excellent projects to showcase today, and then we'll close it out closer to 1 o'clock. All right, so the B2E Project Fund was the original iteration of us providing some funding at B2E. It was established in 2022, and it was created to enable our committee members to undertake strategic projects in their priority areas. And this initial iteration of the fund was highly successful in mobilizing projects and securing additional funders, while enabling community members to work collaboratively to achieve these goals. And these projects on the screen are just a sample of the projects that we did fund through that iteration. The new Innovation Fund was established in 2024. So we revamped it and elevated the focus on innovation itself, and we opened it up to all B2E members. So the innovations that we were looking for are innovative approaches to existing problems, things like testing new ideas and de-risking these approaches with the aim to scale them up. So today's presentations are going to focus on our 2024 intake, which required alignment to our committee priorities, which included for the ABC, Awareness Building and Communications Committee, increasing public awareness of all electric buildings. For the Expanding Industry Capacity Committee, EIC, the development or advancement of training, improving technical knowledge or upskilling for existing trades. And technical, so tech committee, was promising strategies to manage electrical demand to minimize the need for electrical upgrades. So we did look for new approaches to address current challenges using research or development in the following project types. So we looked at technology, codes and regulations, service delivery, education, and social mobilization. So a lot of the projects that we have had to date have included some sort of research component. And like I mentioned before, we're looking at kind of like a bite-sized project that then can be scaled up to a larger project or a larger initiative. And I'm going to pass it over to Peter to talk about our fund impact.
Thanks, Marika. Since the refresh, we've had a total of 3 streams and received over 50 expressions of interest across the 3 streams. Our applicants have a average success rate of a third from both submitting an expression of interest to be invited back to a full application and ultimately being awarded. And to date, the total B2E fund has generated over $1 million in project values across 26 projects. Each project on average receives about $25,000 worth of B2E funding, and with an average leverage of co-funders of 2 to 1. And also, these projects are highly collaborative, with each project having additional 2 project partners on each. Across the board, the B2E contributions have mostly gone towards service delivery projects that are either enhancing or improving the business model and ways of working for low carbon construction, with overall project value pretty evenly spread across service delivery projects and codes and regulation project, with, of course, the recent codes acceleration stream that has contributed to the overall project value of that stream. And overall, across the 50 expressions of interest, we welcomed more exploratory projects that allowed participants to test their ideas through this 2-phase application process, right? And our evaluators and partners have also noted that the fund has taken on a role as a bit of a seed fund, where some of these projects might have not gotten funding from other sources. And we continue to look to improving this fund and providing accessible ways for applicants to receive support in the future. So with that, the stars of the show today, of course, are the project teams that participated in the 2024 Innovation Fund. We'll have 15 minutes for each presentation, and we'll open up to the audience for questions and discussion. Mariko and I will moderate, so feel free to either type your questions in the Q&A, or raise your hand, and we'll get you to perhaps to speak and share. So as we transition to our first presenter, we do have a entry poll just to see kind of, how did you hear about us, whether or not you're a B2E member, and what kind of industry you're working in. So with that, Josephine, I'll get you to Josephine and Dylan, I believe, from the EcoTrust team. I'll get you to start to prepare, and we'll close the poll in a short second here.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Josephine Schrott. I'm with EcoTrust Canada, and I'll be talking about the project that we worked on, thanks to Zeke for that support, on safe temperatures in BC rental housing, and specifically we focused on the municipal and provincial policy pathways to achieving that goal. And so in case you're not familiar, EcoTrust Canada is a nonprofit, a charity working towards sustainable place-based economies and across a number of different sectors. And our community energy initiative specifically is working towards everyone having affordable access to their basic home energy needs and living in comfortable, healthy homes. And we work towards that vision at a few different levels, one being the policy research type of work that this project involved. Then we also do policy advocacy around that. We have a retrofit concierge style program to help folks through the process of getting retrofits in their homes in rural coastal BC. And we also do community level direct installations, mostly of heat pumps with First Nation community partners across rural and remote BC. And so why this project? We know that people are unsafe in their homes because of extreme temperatures, and we know that that's increasingly becoming an issue. So what you're seeing here is just a projection of extreme heat in the blue as it currently, the hazard exposure currently looks, and then a 2050 estimate. So essentially we're going to have our entire population exposed to extreme temperatures. This is just outdoor, but we know that our buildings are really not built for this future. We do know that there are tools to help make homes and the people in them more resilient to this kind of extreme weather. But there are obviously limits on what individuals can do. And so what we hope to do with this project is get a little bit more clarity on, what are the policy tools available to provincial and municipal government to, support action on this with regulation. And so the project sought to investigate in more detail what are the different policy pathways that would both ensure safe indoor temperatures for tenants while also working towards the goal of electrification. A big part of that was also clarifying the legal rights of municipalities, what kind of bylaw and enforcement mechanisms they have at their disposal, and then also looking at what is within provincial purview, what policy changes would we like to see from the province, and looking at whether electrification by means of heat pumps is sufficient to ensure thermal safety for most homes. And we did focus on Part 9, so smaller homes, small multi-unit buildings or single detached homes, just because there is also a lot of great work already being done on larger apartment buildings. And as mentioned earlier, we in line with the fund objectives, we are looking to help build awareness and guidance resources and sharing that. And so this is looking very skewed to me, but basically our project was doing a lot of research to capture all that's come out since the heat dome around academic literature and learnings and studies, and synthesizing that, complementing that with expert interviews from various fields, but particularly around tenant impacts as well. Then we did host a forum last year in the spring that had a session specifically on this topic. So that also allowed us to get further feedback from a diverse group of stakeholders. We sought input from provincial and municipal staff and elected officials, and then took all that to refine and go into further details around the policy pathways. For each one of those, we looked at what's the status currently in BC and where could it go in future? What are other jurisdictions doing and who has authority to move it forward? And so, we looked more at the municipal tools there and also started tracking action at the municipal level, because a few things were actually developing as we were doing this work. And then this all went into the final project report. I can also share the links in the chat after. And then we separately have this action tracker that we're keeping updated to keep track of all the good work that municipalities are doing around this. And other than these outcomes, I feel also it's important to mention that there was a lot of coordination and shared learning, I think, among a lot of different organizations and from different sectors. And that was a really important and valuable part of this project that is woven throughout the report as well. I don't have time to go really deeply into each of the policy pathways, but just to give you a brief overview, so there's a table you can find in the report. We assessed all of these policies on whether they cover existing rental units, whether they will ensure safe indoor temperatures, whether they can avoid substantial rent increases, and whether they might or would also encourage electric space and water heating. There is an asterisk on the rent increase piece because currently in BC, building owners are allowed to pass on capital improvement costs to tenants. So most policies have some possibility of a rent increase via that option attached to them. Right now, we're looking specifically at one of the, I think, key policies that has perhaps the most traction right now, which is the right to cool. So that's really just prohibiting unreasonable cooling bans that folks are facing, both in rental units as well as in stratas and other setups. And so at the provincial level, the right to cool could be incorporated into Tenancy Acts and Strata Act, and municipalities can also incorporate it into their standards of maintenance bylaws. Speaking of standards of maintenance, these broadly specify usually some kind of standard for healthy and safe housing. And there are a number of municipalities in BC who have those, not the majority, but a lot of them do. And so they're really an opportunity to include temperature limits, for example. They all have minimum temperature limits or requiring some level of heating. And so the idea would be to add a maximum temperature limit to require some level of cooling as well. We have the province in here as well because BC does have a provincial standards of maintenance guide and sample bylaw that is intended to help municipalities implement these standards. However, this provincial guide is from the 90s and really doesn't address the current climate-related hazards that we are facing. So we're really calling on the province to update that. Other standards and codes that are a bit less directly focused on thermal safety or temperatures, but also could play a really important role towards that goal in rental units are, for example, the retrofit code and existing buildings renewal. So really looking at how can we bring existing buildings up to better standards. Similarly, rental energy performance standards, often measures that can increase energy efficiency, will also have a positive effect on extreme temperature issues, particularly when done with those issues in mind. And then equipment standards, so ensuring improvements at the time of replacing space and water heating equipment. The province does have highest efficiency equipment standards promised, but unfortunately not yet implemented. And then a couple things that we thought were really important in terms of particularly filling the data gaps and just increasing transparency and information availability. One of them is around rental licensing. So we do have this at the provincial level for short-term rentals. The province could, for example, expand this to all rental units. Some municipalities have a licensing system. And so that just gives a lot more information about where renters are, where the buildings are, and maybe what kinds of standards or how they're maintained or what kind of issues can come up. These are all kind of possibilities of tracking information and targeting interventions much more decisively and directly to the folks who need it most. Similarly, with energy ratings, these really help make visible some of these invisible elements of a home. And yeah, can just provide better transparency for renters and buyers. So this is something that the province, for example, could potentially require. And there's obviously an opportunity to include climate adaptation or resilience considerations in these kinds of labeling initiatives as well. Just quickly on the province, we didn't get much enthusiasm in terms of our outreach to them. The Union of BC Municipalities resolutions on this matter also haven't really resulted in a meaningful response, and we do know that the province currently isn't considering changes to the Residential Tenancy Act or the Strata Act. And it seems like they are currently willing to just leave the burden of proof and risk on individuals to make their case around, the right to cool rather than making that the default. So in the absence of this kind of provincial leadership that there's a lot of policy opportunity for that isn't really being taken up by the province at the moment. There is, of course, that does discourage action at the municipal level for some municipalities, but nonetheless, some are taking action on this despite the lack of leadership from the province. And so the city of Port Moody and the city of New Westminster did both during kind of the duration of this project actually implement right to cool in their bylaws, one through a standards of maintenance bylaw and New West through a rental business regulation bylaw. So two mechanisms, similar sort of outcome. And then the City of Toronto did actually implement a bylaw around requiring shared cooled amenity spaces and is looking at a maximum temperature bylaw this spring. And we'll keep track of what keeps happening. Hopefully there'll be a lot more to add to that list. One of the things that we thought in terms of next steps might be helpful is getting a more fulsome legal opinion on specifically the municipal authority around maximum temperatures, because there seems to be a fair bit of hesitation from municipalities around that. Also, I think there's a lot of work to be done around defending existing policies that are already making buildings better and renters safer. And there's opportunity to look at all the energy and emissions focused policies that we have right now and to see how can we integrate or add climate resilience considerations so that these issues like extreme heat that are really affecting people already in their day-to-day lives can be improved alongside the climate mitigation efforts. And I think because the benefits are so broad and they touch upon so many areas of life, going, to housing maintenance and quality, people's health and mental health, burdens on the healthcare system. There's all kinds of, potential benefits for addressing extreme heat and making sure that people can safely shelter in place in their homes. And so there's also lots of opportunity for cross-sectoral collaboration and organizing to move some of these policies forward. And so I'll just leave you with those links. Again, I can pop them in the chat, and I would also just encourage you to reach out if you are interested in taking this work forward, collaborating in any way, or have any questions or follow-ups for me. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Josephine. Great presentation. I'm curious on your what's next slide. You mentioned, there are a number of things that you would recommend being done. Is there anything that EcoTrust Canada is currently planning on taking on out of this what's next? And if so, or if not even, who might be good leaders to take it forward, or who might you want to collaborate with?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I would say we are already on the sort of defending existing policy and are always happy to collaborate as widely as possible. But kind of going beyond defending against policy backsliding, I do see us this year doing more work around specifically supporting municipalities on this, doing a bit more to clarify the questions that municipal staff and electeds have around what their authority is, what the tools at their disposal are, and what that can kind of look like, and help build the learning between municipalities, just because there is no kind of provincial direction or guidance being given. And so municipalities are kind of left to figure things out on their own. And I see us having a role in being able to share that information and also being able to bring in other stakeholders that municipalities might not interact with as much, that we have good relationships with. And so I think we're able to kind of provide a really cross-sectoral, like broad perspective on things that I hope we can leverage really at the municipal level around specifically the right to cool and some of these temperature standards approaches, and see where that goes. And hopefully also, I think rental licensing could be helpful on that front. Yeah.
Josephine, I see that there are two questions in the chat here. I'll read out the first one for everyone. From Gillis, in terms of the slide, about 3 slides back on licensing and labeling, he had a question on that the energy and adaptation labeling is mentioned. What are the examples of these, and what standards or programs are currently being used?
Yeah, so currently in Canada, we have EnerGuide, so that's really focused on energy efficiency and emissions for homes. And often we also are seeing approaches still just focused on buyers only. I don't really see a reason that renters should be excluded from these kinds of efforts. So I really hope that as governments are actively trying to move forward labeling efforts and working on potentially maybe updating or building on EnerGuide assessments and approaches, that that can be opened up to rental units as well. And then we are also, I think, seeing interesting efforts in other jurisdictions around including some of these adaptation considerations. This is not yet a thing in Canada, as far as I know, but I think Australia, for example, is really at the forefront of including extreme heat and also considering how that potentially could be linked to insurance savings. So kind of figuring out how some sort of certification of a home's, resilience and adaptedness to some of these climate threats, potentially being able to lower insurance premiums that way as well.
That's great. Thank you. There's another question in the chat from Brady, wondering if you have a resource sheet for tenants facing unsafe temperatures in their homes, something that might help them to advocate for themselves, or ideas of where they can get support.
Thanks, Brady. Yeah, we don't have one, but there are great tenant advocacy organizations that probably do. I'm not sure if they have something specifically for extreme heat, but tenants who are, needing support around what they can do, what their rights are, and that could include issues with overheating or trying to install an AC. I would recommend an organization like the Tenants Resource Advocacy Center, TRAC, or there is Acorn that organizes around tenants, or your local tenants union, like there's the Vancouver Tenants Union, for example. So those kinds of organizations will have better resources than us for that. Yeah.
That's great. So I'm thinking more along the lines of, like, in the spirit of helping others who are taking on innovation projects. Was there something that you learned from taking on this project that would be helpful for others taking on similar work? Do you have any advice for others taking on this type of work?
I don't know if I have a broad sort of something that would apply to everyone, but I think I sort of alluded to, what's been really valuable for me throughout this process is getting to talk to all these different peoples from various different organizations and places and backgrounds with professional as well as lived experience of this issue. And that's, I think, really helped us to get a broad sense of the pros and cons of these different policies and potential adverse impacts that we need to mitigate for. And so I would love to continue doing that kind of collaborative work and being able to weave in different perspectives. And I feel like that's something that, I would recommend to others just because it's felt very valuable for us.
That's great. Peter, any more questions?
No, I think the questions are mostly answered from the chat. So I think, Josephine, if you also have a moment, feel free to go back in the chat if we missed anything. And perhaps we'll start to make the transition over to our next presenter, Todd from TECA. Todd, handing it over to you. Feel free to start to take control and set up and get situated. Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Todd Backus. I'm TECA's Chief Operating Officer, and the project that I was involved with is the HVAC design packages for BC standardized housing. So for anyone who's not familiar with TECA, we're a nonprofit trade association, and our mission is to improve the HVAC industry. So that is, admittedly, this project is a little bit tangential to our regular scope of work, but I feel like it still ties in because we are trying to improve the HVAC industry in a little bit different way. So what were the objectives of this project? Well, we want to reduce costs and barriers for construction of the BC Standardized Housing Catalog. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the province of BC released this catalog with different floor plans and a design guide that allowed for some modularity and mixing and matching with the intent of reducing the cost of construction for either like laneway homes or duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. There are 10 different base models, and what I wanted to do was come in and provide mechanical documentation so that if you are trying to build these standard dwellings, you have a huge portion of the design work already completed for you up front. So the documents that I have produced are heat loss and heat gain calculations, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning plans, equipment schedules for the mechanical equipment, as well as a design guideline document. So this was actually quite a large undertaking because within those 10 buildings, there are 24 different dwelling units. So I modeled 4 different locations, which I felt was a reasonable representation of the different climate zones in BC. So that's Kelowna, Prince George, Prince Rupert, and Vancouver. And for those of you who are familiar with heat gain calculations, you know that the orientation of the building, so your, say, north window is going to get a lot less heat than your south window. Well, that means I had to take each one of these models and rotate it to the 4 cardinal directions. We also included 2 versions of the heat loss, heat gain reports. So the first one, which is shown on the screen here, is the standard CSA F280 report. I did also include TECA's detailed component breakdown report. And what that shows that's a little bit different is the room by room calculations. So all of these heat loss, heat gain calculations, all room by room. But this one actually shows what each component contributes. So let's say I'm looking at the primary bedroom and I want to remove a window. Well, I can actually look at what my window loads are for that specific room and understand what those modifications will entail. So the sheer volume of the heat loss, heat gain reports was actually really considerable because we needed the 24 dwelling units times 4 locations times 4 orientations times the 2 versions. So we actually produced 768 variations on the heat loss, heat gain calculations. And this is something that I find a lot of mechanical designers try and skip this step, and they shouldn't. So this to me is a major component of the project, and reducing that barrier not only of cost, but also to improve the quality of the outcome, because every mechanical design should start with a heat loss, heat gain calculation. But because so many projects skip it, you really do set up for really poor results. And I'm hoping that even if I can't find exactly my city, like I live in Nanaimo, not Vancouver, but I can still look at the Nanaimo heat loss, heat gain. Sorry, somebody's coming through there. Just going to mute them. Yes, so I can look at, say, Vancouver and say, well, it's a little bit different than Nanaimo, but I have some idea of where my loads are and the magnitude of my loads. And can a heat pump serve that? Or do I need some sort of backup, fossil fuel or electric heat source? So each of these 10 buildings has HVAC plans, 2 different styles. So one has a centrally ducted forced air system, which I think a lot of us are very familiar with. You'd have your air handler in the middle of the room and your plenum with all your pipes coming off of it. And I also included a mini split design that is separate. So the intent of that was not all of these dwellings are well suited for a centrally ducted forced air system. Some of it is in large part because of how the walls and realistically where you're going to get the pipes up from the crawl space, because there's no mechanical room on any of the main floor or upper floor. It's basically the crawl space is your only mechanical room. So that is really challenging when you have like a 3-story building and you're trying to get up from the crawl space all the way up to the top floor. That can be really challenging with a centrally ducted system and an open floor plan layout. So I went back and did the mini split system as well with an independent HRV for ventilation. All of the plans are fully annotated. So it has pipe sizes, it has grill sizes, it has comments on where pipes are going or what they have to avoid. So it is quite detailed. Now, obviously, the intent is that the builder or whatever project manager is actually constructing this dwelling is going to have to tailor it to their specific needs, but it is very, very helpful to get that heat loss, heat gain loads, your pipe sizing, and also a rough layout. So I don't have the structural plans, though that's not really something that could be included in this, but it'll at least highlight where some of the potential drops are and what runs need to be coordinated, because as I mentioned, with the very open floor plan, if you're going with a centrally ducted system, that can be really, really challenging to hide those pipes without drops. And if you're starting with like an 8-foot ceiling, those drops are very painful. So it'll help with the coordination of the project and reduce the concessions that are made, architecturally because of a lack of coordination. So all of these mechanical plans are drawn in AutoCAD. These plans will be fully available, as will all of the reports. All of this information is essentially open source. As long as you're not selling it, you are allowed to use it for whatever you like, even for education purposes. I'm just happy to see it out there and, make it your own, promote it if you can, but use it. The equipment schedules are located on the last page. And the intent with this is, so like if you are familiar with like part 3 drawings, this is really common where you'll have like full equipment schedules actually on the plans. But I find in a lot of cases on Part 9 buildings, especially when, you know, it's like the homeowner who's managing the project, they don't get a lot of this information. And it's really critical to actually note this down so that you can show, are you meeting your heat loss and heat gain requirements? What are the electrical requirements of your equipment? And then you can actually share that with the other trades, in particular, the electrical trade, because I know historically there have been a lot of challenges in projects that are not well managed to get that communication occurring between mechanical and electrical, right? They should be on the same page very early in the project. And if that communication isn't happening, it can be really painful and expensive later. So this is what they look like. I tried to keep them nice and clear and you know, simple to read, as well as include all of that critical information, in particular for electrical coordination. And all of the equipment on the plans is tagged as well. So it should be very clear to everyone what piece of equipment is what and where it is located and what its requirements are. So to support that, I also created some design guidelines. It is a document that supports the construction and design process and talks about why certain decisions were made and what are some additional considerations that should be made. For instance, plumbing was outside of the scope of this project, but the mechanical contractor should be coordinating things like the location of the hot water tank, venting, if it's gas, if it's electric. Is there actually a crawl space, or do you have to carve out some of your living space to create a mechanical room, right? Because I know there are some regions in BC where a crawl space is not going to happen. So just kind of a flag for the homeowner, hey, what are you going to do with this hot water tank? Because again, what I want to do is get that communication and that coordination happening so that the obvious issues that we've all seen on poorly managed projects don't pop up and, you know, cause a lot of cost and pain for what I expect to be, in general, a less experienced project manager. There's also comments on interpreting the heat loss, heat gain reports, what you should do if you are making modifications to the floor plan, as well as system-specific considerations. So things like when should you consider a mini split system? When should you consider a centrally ducted system? Next steps on this project. So I have previously spoken with representatives from the BC government about getting this information packaged together with the architectural plans. They were receptive to it, so I am working on getting that bundled together because I really want to have maximum value out of this, right? I want it to be very clear that when somebody downloads the architectural plans, they have this whole supporting package of HVAC design to go with it. We are continuing development with BCIT. This is outside the original scope of the project, but I have some contacts at BCIT. They got really excited about this project. So they've actually helped out with it and lent me one of their EITs. And basically what we're going to do is continue working on what happens when we bump up to step 5. So BCIT actually hired E3 Eco Group to do a report, just ensure that all of the architectural models and the heat loss, heat gain calculations, all that stuff matches step 3. In some regions, these designs actually meet step 4 and EL4, but we do want to look at what happens when we go to step 5. So that would be another whole set of, what is that, 736 heat loss, heat gain calculations with tighter assemblies. So we have a massive amount of data, and I'm hoping that not only BCIT and TECA study this information, but I'm hoping that other educational groups pick it up as well, because it's so much information and it is available to the public, right? And like nobody is allowed to sell this for a profit, but you are allowed to, put it in presentations or put it in educational material. So I really want to get it out there as much as possible. So that concludes my presentation. I think I did see some chat going on here.
That's great, Todd. Thank you so much for that presentation and the enormous amount of work that it was to create all those heat loss, heat gain calculations. Actually, I see that Ryan has his hand up, so why don't we go to his question first?
Hey, Todd. This is really great to see. Question for you. As like this provides like general guidance, was there any thought to including like installation standards of practice guidance to inform kind of what you expect when it gets applied with construction?
Yeah, so I kept it pretty high level.
Yeah.
It would be nice to reference more detailed guidelines, more detailed standards, but I was trying to be careful about not overwhelming the person reading this, because my expectation is that it is a homeowner, right? Like, sure, there might be some contractors that pick this up and decide to build a bunch of these, but it feels to me like the person that needs this the most is, regular person who is not really that familiar with construction. And so I did try to keep it at a very low level in terms of like jargon and complexity. But that is a great suggestion. I would love to add more and more resources.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of going like, deep down the technical rabbit hole, but I think some guidance on like standards of practice around what you expect around materials used, like sealing, all that, like of duct work, like that kind of stuff to make sure that you're getting the design intent fulfilled out there in the field would be good. And then the only other one I thought of too is like when it comes to mechanical rooms, like you and I both know, like they're the afterthought. And so providing some better perspective on what the expectation is around like clearances and equipment placement and servicing and stuff like that, whether it's indoor and outdoor, might be helpful too. Just to, again, help evolve sort of people's thinking around what's needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It is like there is a lot of information in that package, and it definitely does touch on things like access, especially when I'm talking about, the real requirement in a lot of cases where you have to have a crawl space, because if you don't, you need to then carve out a mechanical room out of your living space, and like honestly, these plans don't work if you're carving out a mechanical room for like a centrally ducted system. So I do touch on it, but there's always room for more.
Yeah, well, really great to see. So well done, sir.
Thanks, Ryan.
Todd, speaking of systems, I see a question in the chat from Cindy. Are there nuances to be considered based on the product or I guess equipment and systems being used?
Yes, so I do touch on that again in the design guideline, but it is really hard to create this kind of open design documentation. It's very different than if I was, say, a consulting engineer or a mechanical designer on a specific project, because I can ask very direct questions about, what do you want as a client? I have that direct interface, but knowing that it's just kind of going out to the ether, and there are a lot of decisions around things like, well, how have you framed this house? How have you, have you gone with a flat roof or a peaked roof? Have you included a crawl space? So there is a bit of limitation there with getting too specific, but I do talk about things like if you're sizing a heat pump based on these heat loss, heat gain loads, what are some of the nuances with that, right? Like things like your nominal capacity versus the actual capacity of the heat pump at your design temperature. Some guidelines around HRV design. What is your absolute rock bottom code requirements versus what is a good practice for good indoor air quality and thermal comfort. So yes, there are a lot of nuances in there. I'm hoping that it is both brief and educational so that somebody who does not have a lot of experience on this topic can read it and start asking the right questions of their mechanical contractor. But at the end of the day, a huge amount of responsibility is going to fall on the mechanical contractor, not only to follow what we've laid out here, but also to make sound, design decisions and installation decisions on the project.
Well said, Todd. Before I pass it to you, Mariko, I had a quick question to perhaps the audience here. Has anyone worked on a project out of the design catalog? If they had any insights or experience they would like to share, would love to know. So feel free to either jump in the chat or raise your hand. But yeah, Mariko, over to you.
Well, yeah, I find it really interesting that the design catalog went out without thought to what the mechanical systems might be. And so I'm really happy to see that, Todd has put in this amount of work to support that project. Because ultimately, we are trying to achieve better buildings, and mechanical systems are certainly part of that. So Todd, I was just curious, do you have any advice for any other people who might undertake a similar project?
Don't wait till the last minute. I mean, it's funny, but it actually is really honest. Like there's so much information and documentation to generate with this. Like if you don't chip away at it, it's really painful. And finding efficiencies like for the heat loss, heat gain, we had somebody write basically a program that modified the cells in the calculator and then ran the outputs. So rather than going through and changing like 300 some odd unique files, getting somebody with some programming ability to say, change these 3 cells, print, change these 3 cells, print. Huge time saver. Yeah. Oh, I did want to add, so I would love to see things like plumbing, structural, and electrical packaged into this as well. Like that to me is the vision for like when this project is 100% complete, is when you can download a full, essentially ready to build home. That would just be like the pinnacle for me. I got another question. I have not really had a chance to test this out with target users, but I have shopped it around internally, and I have left contact information. So I honestly don't think a lot of people are using this resource. I'm hoping that the mechanical system will add some value and amplify the message that this is available, but I would be shocked to hear that more than half of the people in this room have even heard of the standard housing catalog.
Yeah, so it sounds like some promotion needs to be done around that standardized housing catalog. Do you have an ask of, like, we have a group here who is ready and willing. Do you have an ask of the community here to get this project out into the ether?
Yeah, I think, when you meet people, maybe not even people who are like directly involved in construction, let them know that this information is out there and that they can save a huge amount of time, effort, and money if they don't reinvent the wheel, right? Like go to these resources and use them. And the more they get used, the more popular they become. I feel like it'll be like a self-feeding cycle.
And thank you for taking it on to create those resources, Todd.
My pleasure.
All right. I guess we'll now transition to the next project. We have the Canadian Association of Consulting Energy Advisors with Cindy and the project team on the line. Cindy, if I could ask you to start to settle yourself in and get ready. Perfect. All right, over to you.
Okay, and Melissa Hamer, I don't know if you're showing your face, but you need to
Yes. Can you
take
see
your
me?
camera off so everybody can see you. So I'm really honored to be here today to share on a project that we were successful in getting some funding for, not only from this very generous group, but we also got a top up from BC Hydro. So the project was really creating a training pilot on demystifying electrical capacity and service sizing. This came about just actually from some discussions that we had had with some of our energy advisors, and we realized that this is really a space that EAs could really take some leadership and assistance with. We wanted to bring together. We started out with energy advisors because they tend to be in the hub of things, but we felt that these fundamentals of service sizing for Part 9 residential buildings is actually applicable to many different groups that are in the Part 9 sector. Before I move forward, just in case you don't know who CACEA is, the A is silent. We are the Canadian, as a Canadian association representing energy advisors across the country. We're here to provide them with knowledge to elevate the profession, to ensure that they have a sustainable opportunities. And we actually see energy advisors as being a real champion and partner, not just with energy efficiency, but in other areas such as, Todd, you know, the F280, there are EAs that are also assisting in that space. The integrated design process, we've done a lot of work in this area, and we see EAs playing a larger role in electrification. So we see them as, because they're there advising the homeowners, they're there advising the builders. And many times there's a lot of unnecessary service upgrades. And so if we can help reduce that, then, you know, we're really on a good pathway forward, not just for the homeowner at the end of the day, but also for, you know, the electrical grid in the province. So we actually brought together, oh, I missed one. Oh no, I'm missing oh, here we go. So I'm going to go to this slide. So what we did is we brought together energy advisors from across the country for an in-person pilot. But the goal of this training is to actually be able to deliver it across the country to an EA audience, but it could also be other people. We partnered with BC IT as the deliverer of this training. You know, they are experts at what they do. And we were thrilled to bring together 16 participants. 15 were from BC and one was actually from Alberta. They were independent EAs who do operate under the ERS procedure, but we also wanted to make sure that our partners BC Hydro and Alberta EcoTrust and Zeke were there, because we can see future engagement perhaps with this kind of work. The really cool thing is that everybody who attended this training actually registered through BCIT. So they are BCIT students, and everybody received a handbook. The course material was actually developed by BCIT and with an advisory who assisted with the content development. And Ben, I'm going to butcher his name, so I'll let Melissa share that from Riverside Energy Systems contributed and was the primary instructor for the training, although Gary Hamer was there from BCIT. And one of our secret weapons that we didn't know, there was Jason from BC Hydro, who provided some incredible information that's going to help us moving forward when we get to the next steps. So Melissa, I'm going to, I think, really let you talk about, the course development and that sort of thing, because that's really your knowledge.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Cindy. So yeah, as Cindy mentioned, this is a real partnership to support a lot of the work that we were seeing around electrification. It fit really well into the high performance kind of net zero passive house training that we were already doing, kind of starting with building envelope, getting into mechanicals and ventilation, and seeing this real need for kind of addressing electrical planning in a smart way. So yeah, we was really excited to kind of bring this group of people together and have that national perspective as well. So yeah, as Cindy mentioned, this was a course that we actually delivered and have created through BCIT. Yeah, Riverside Energy Systems providing some really great insights through Ben Jaducci, and Gary Hamer with BC Hydro, and then Volta Research and Enercan was a really great supporter. Enercan provided some good context about jurisdictional scans of where electrification is across Canada with every province and territory. And what are the policy and implementation pieces around actually being able to kind of do electrification and apply some of the planning pieces. So yeah, we started with that. And as Cindy mentioned, participants. And then so the course itself was over 2 days. We did deliver it in person in our lab. And we really tried to focus on addressing some of the kind of the big areas in terms of, what EAs need, as EAs are kind of that key person involved in the integrated design planning process, and being able to kind of bring up those considerations early on, knowing that that's the best opportunity to kind of make these decisions and savings. So also kind of aligning with what Enercan came up with too with their jurisdictional scan of looking at, let's explore at a very high level what are the Section 8 principles of the Canadian Electrical Code, which is nationally but implemented or interpreted differently from across different authorities having jurisdiction. So there's still regional kind of considerations, but we tried to kind of keep at that national level, as well as provide some kind of nuances of how it's being applied currently. Yeah, looking at the service sizing and utility practices. So kind of that, what is motivating a utility in terms of looking at like smart electrical planning, and what is it actually, how is the service size, like just some basic electrical kind of fundamentals too. And then looking at what like load calculations and demand factors. So kind of those big key pieces of equipment. So the heating and cooling, kitchens, like with the range or stove, EV charging and all of those pieces. Then looking at strategies for reducing calculated service load, and looking at kind of the solar photovoltaic and battery integration too. So as it says in this last piece too, we actually, a big part of the project was convening a series of 6 or so case studies from across, it included across Canada. So there was Nova Scotia, Ontario, BC, and Alberta represented. And so those actually looked at new builds as well as retrofits. a variety of different typologies, and actually kind of provided the breakdown of what was chosen, and it gave us the opportunity to actually, take that data and be able to work through them as examples going forward. So just what I said, the hands-on learning activities used those case studies, as well as we actually had some equipment in the lab as well, so people could actually, look at different panels of different ages, and also look at some load shedding and EV EMS, or energy management system devices too, to just kind of get familiarized with that. So the learning activities focused on analyzing utility data for peak loads. So within BC, pulling it from the BC Hydro, how do you do that? If you're an EA, how would you kind of coach the homeowner to be able to get that information for you? What do you need, and then how can you actually analyze that for over that year span? Looking at electrical panels, so kind of just being able to understand, how do you read a breaker size? How do you tell what the service capacity is for that electrical panel? Looking at HVAC appliance nameplates. So if you're in an existing home, all that stuff could be there. How could you potentially put that information together? And then, with the new builds and retrofits, being able to kind of provide some real examples that they could sink their teeth into. We also were able to get, load control advice and a bit of a demo from Vectrix, which is working on a local project with the City of Vancouver, province of BC, and BC Hydro. And so that was really great to kind of see an actual example of this being implemented with some multifamily housing. And overall, the feedback was, definitely very valuable. We heard I guess Cindy didn't mention, but we kind of handpicked the energy advisors, ones who were had a variety of experience in the industry, but ones that were in different regions. So we could really get a good cross section of, of that feedback, at least within BC. And a lot of very, great questions, like being able to bring in their own actual projects they were currently working on. So the discussions were really in depth and quite helpful. And being able to really honestly discuss what are the electrification challenges, and the knowledge that they had over those 2 days, just seeing how much they would be able to apply that in the job the next day. They did say, looking at more product examples and having some more manufacturer input. I think one of the interesting things that came up, which is probably also kind of the lessons learned, and I know there's work nationally to try to support this, is just the being able to actually identify what how you would size a heat pump. So what are you looking at? What's the rating that you're actually looking at, and kind of getting a bit more of a standard approach that way. And then as well, recommending that everybody needs to kind of have this baseline understanding of, how does this affect the builder? How does this affect the mechanical contractor? What about the electrical contractor? How does this affect the authority having jurisdiction? So a lot of really great discussions, and definitely kind of really reinforced what we had thought going into the project, that it's having this foundational knowledge to kind of get people on the same page is incredibly important. And then also, making the business case for it, and kind of talking about how much could be saved in terms of cost as well as time. If, looking at this from the kind of the load management or demonstrated load. So I guess what I didn't mention is one of the big pieces from the training was actually discussing demonstrated load, which is in the Canadian Electrical Code, being able to say, pull that annual, 1 year utility data and actually see what is the peak, where's that peak amperage that we have over that 1 year, and then being able to make a case for if I'm adding an additional, a heat pump, or if I'm adding other things, could that still be within that allowable service that I currently have? Or is that something that would have to be, that would need a service upgrade? And also highlighting that within the context of all kind of like the Technical Safety BC or any other safety authority, it does vary slightly, but there are only certain people that can actually submit those permits, right? So it's still electrical contractors and specific people there. So the energy advisor is really kind of being able to drive the or support the conversation and trying to, assist with like where possible of getting that information so that those informed decisions can be made. And then, yeah, case studies. And then I think one of the most fun thing, or the aha moment that we saw in the 2 days, was we actually asked participants to pull their own utility data and come to the the next day, and we put it up on the board, and we're able to kind of see what was the service that they had and what was the use that they saw from their demonstrated load, and nobody exceeded that. It was pretty, for the most part, there was quite a bit of amperage left. So it was, I think, it really highlighted what the opportunity is if this can be done at a larger scale. And yeah, just the lessons learned, having kind of having more demonstrations of load managed devices, more access to the Canadian Electrical Code if needed, and just resources as well, expanding the assignments so that they can kind of spend some more time working through the entire process. And then, the piece of the electrical permit requirements, and even since the course, just seeing how interpreting some of these requirements is so different across authorities having jurisdiction. So in terms of kind of one of the next steps that we're working on too is how do we try to support the work that's being done nationally to also support authorities having jurisdiction with understanding the Section 8 and how could this be, support electrification. So in terms of next steps, we're working to make some updates based on the feedback we've had, and adapt for an online delivery so we can actually deliver this nationally, so reach energy advisors from across Canada, and then also kind of identify some key stakeholders, so builders groups, electrical contractors, mechanical contractors, and even some authorities having jurisdiction to be able to kind of join and then see how can this be leveraged in other kind of professional development capacity. Adapting for interprovincial audiences, and so I think the big opportunities, especially around this demonstrated load and being able to utilize utility data, is BC, Ontario, and Nova Scotia. Those are the 3 provinces that have that do support this, and then there is the information there. Other provinces are a bit further behind when it comes to this, but there's definitely an appetite and interest. It'll just take a little bit longer. But the majority of the training around just looking at planning for service sizing and load is still very applicable. It's just that small piece. And then developing some virtual materials, so having some videos and ways to kind of see this in more of see more kind of technologies, and then promoting to a wider industry. And then, looking forward. Cindy, did you want to take this one? No?
I think, well, I mean, really, I know that ECIT is looking to, based on the feedback that we receive from the participants and work that's being done, by by BCIT and others. We want to, as Melissa said, expand this training. It was a bit of a fire hose, and so it's looking at, how do we provide, very complex information in chunk-sized pieces that become useful for people. And I know that that's something that BCIT is going to be working on with support from CACEA so that we can deliver a pilot for a virtual offering, so that we can reach more people across the country. Melissa, there's some things here that you might want to, chat with, but
yeah, so and the other part too is how can we, take components or modules of this training and support the trades programs, as well as kind of the electrical contractors or mechanical contractors and such too. So supporting the technical upskilling. One thing that has already been that is being used is some of this the service sizing related to heat pumps. And so in some of the training we do with TECA around heat pump design, air-to-air heat pump design, we're actually including some of these examples and really highlighting this piece too. So mechanical contractors are already seeing the importance of this. And so being able to do that more as a resource is, incredibly helpful. And yeah, it's there's a lot. Also, like Natural Resources Canada, the LEAP team, and trying to see how we can support the use of the tools for the Spark tool and such as well. So there's a lot happening, and it's trying to support, with the kind of knowledge mobilization around that.
Yeah, and we see this this information is really important because often energy advisors are leading those integrated design process conversations. And often this conversation and electricians are often left out. And so if the EAs have this information, have a broader understanding, they can talk to, because oftentimes, as you know, let's get a heat pump, let's increase the service size without really understanding what's behind that decision. So we also, again, see EAs more than just say, providing that EnerGuide label and verification. They can actually be a true partner in moving the needle forward in other areas. We are, though, making it very clear, just like we do with the F280, they have a lane and they can't go outside that lane. So, that is also a very important part of what we put in this training.
Cindy, just to also jump on that, I think you made a good point about what EAs are doing, and perhaps for those of us in the room who are not familiar with the role of energy advisors, could you also elaborate on what the current role of energy advisors are and where do you see them heading as well?
Beautiful question. Thank you, Peter. Okay, here we go. My Rick Mercer rant. We saw with things like the Greener Homes program that energy advisors are being called in to verify, go in, do the blower door to check the tightness of the envelope. They go and they take measurements. They do a lot of modeling to check the energy efficiency of a home. While they're on site, they can also do things like assess the safety of a building. Is there mold? Are there cracks in the building? And advise say, we're looking at existing homes, advise the homeowner of other things that they might want to consider before they take these energy efficiency upgrades. They can help in the homeowner put a roadmap together so that they're putting an affordable roadmap together. They can check contractor quotes. They can do the integrated design process. That many of them are trained in doing the F280 calculation, whether it's through TECA, whether it's through HRAI, but there's also now training through the Volta Snap tool that pulls from the HOT 2000 file, and with a few additional entries, they can then do that heat loss, heat gain calculation, because many contractors don't want to do that if they're doing a quote, whereas the EA can give that diagnostic information to the homeowner. EAs are also doing duct flow testing of the airflow in the duct systems, which again, very important diagnostic number to help see, what can the ducks accomplish. We see EAs taking on more of a role even in resilience and providing advice in resilience. We see them taking more advice in helping guide homeowners and contractors and electricians. We've had some EAs actually instruct the electrician coming in about the load, having taken this training. So even the electricians often don't have that understanding. So I think EAs are really moving towards being building advisors as opposed to just energy advisors. And I think there's a lot of opportunity moving forward. Electrification advisors, all of this sort of thing. So that's where I see the role of EAs moving forward. But not all EAs are created equal. We need training like this, but we also need organizations to be requiring this kind of training. One of the reasons why, we need EAs to be, CACEA members have to have continuing education hours. That's not a requirement of NRCan. Our members, you want people to have errors and emissions insurance if they're doing this because they're giving advice, not a requirement from NRCan. It is a requirement of CACEA. Not that I'm trying to plug CACEA, but I'm just saying that there are differences, and we have master energy advisors. We're looking at different levels of knowledge and expertise so that the people here, if you're looking for a certain kind of person, Todd, you went to E3, both Einar Helbig and Emma Conway are master EAs. Great group that you went to. That's awesome. So sorry. Okay, I'm off the soapbox.
Well
Thanks,
said, Cindy. Yeah, and also thank you, Melissa, as well. I see we're slowly coming up to time here, Marie.
Oh, I do have one more question for them.
Yes,
because,
I know. And then if there's any questions in the chat, feel free to type them through and we'll try to get through.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like the next steps for this. And obviously, if you're going through an education provider, getting the course to a place where it becomes publicly available, is there anything that the community here can do to help support that process, or is it kind of just in your hands at the moment? So I hear there's interest.
Yeah, there is interest, and I'm going to pass that to Melissa. The reason why we went with BCIT is because they, when you're putting something together like this, you want to make sure, if you're putting training, you want to make sure that whoever is going to be providing complex information like this, that they really understand adult learning principles, and that they're taking the time, and that we are taking the time for, looking into what are the competencies and then what are the learning objectives. Otherwise, it's going to be I can't think of the word right now, but also just because somebody's an expert in something doesn't mean they're a good presenter. Doesn't mean that so that's sort of why we decided to partner with BCIT, because that's their expertise. And they're also have knowledge about how much information should you be cramming into a 2-day program. We probably crammed in too much, and that was, again, I think, a learning from this. And what Melissa may not have mentioned, which I think was really helpful, the participants received pre-course materials to prime them to come prepared and ready to do this training. And I think that was really valuable for them, because they were a little bit more familiar when they came through the doors. They knew what to expect, and I think that's really important. The other thing we did, which I think was really valuable, is we provided a very fulsome handbook, and that handbook had content that was beyond what was taught in the class, because then it could be continuous reference material. So this is part 9. So some people deal with both part 3 and part 9. This is right now just focused on the part 9 sector. Did that answer your question? Awesome.
I will also add too, in terms of the plans, like the, virtual delivery being in the national, that's something that is fairly easy to do in the existing framework. We have talked as well about, how could this be maybe licensed or delivered in person, in Ontario, for example, and working with local colleges too. So that's actually part of the next kind of phase of this project too is speaking, using some of our networks, even through BCIT, of having networks with different colleges across Canada, and seeing how could we support that local delivery too.
All right, we have time for one question, David. Go ahead.
I just want to build on what Melissa just said. So I'm David from Ontario Sustainable Energy Association, and we also have a training membership school that's teaching. So we're interested in bringing it. I just downloaded the BCE Electrification Guide, over 240 pages, I think it is. But many of the things are very specific to the province you're in and to the economics.
Yeah.
And Cindy, your group has presented on our stage, and we have that. So I think we have big incentives now in terms of solar on the roof, 50% paid for by Save on Energy, a 12-year plan. We're also talking about building 6 nuclear stations, but that's another matter. But I think there's opportunities in terms of education, and especially as people are losing jobs in one field and coming into ours. So I'm happy to touch base with you and Leon Wasser, who we work with. Thanks.
Thanks very
David.
much. Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
I think I'll also highlight too, just as maybe a final parting thing in terms of the, which is what you were saying, David, around the utilities. Like, there's a really strong incentive from the utilities to support this, right? Like, just in terms of reducing the need to upgrade their own, kind of their transmission in their system too. So I think that's maybe another angle as well, is kind of the utilities from across the country. There's, some that are very kind of supportive around, kind of energy kind of reduction and demand plans. So I think that's another area.
Melissa, I'll just say the SGIN, Smart Grid Innovation Network, they're in New Brunswick. They are looking at the LDCs across across Canada, because they all are under different provincial OEB and SAS Power, etc. So they also just did a modeling thing, and they're pretty powerful, because New Brunswick stepped forward with Siemens and the University of New Brunswick, I think.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right. Thank you for jumping into the discussion as well, David. Thank you to Cindy and Melissa for your presentation and your hard work on this project. So now we'll transition over to our last presenter, Maddie and Ali from FRESCo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Kennedy. I am a senior decarbonization and policy consultant with FRESCo Energy. And we provide engineering services as well as some policy and strategy consulting, mainly for multi-unit residential retrofit. So that's kind of been our niche area for the last few years. And today I'm going to talk to you about our window-mounted heat pump pilot project. And I also have my colleague Frank Lee here, who is an engineer and who can answer any of your technical questions if they come up. So what the project set out to do was test these window-mounted heat pumps that you can see in the photo in real-world examples. So we wanted to do a really limited small-scale pilot and then complement it with some research and learnings. And what I should mention right off the bat, unlike all of the other great projects that we've heard from today, is our project isn't quite done. So we're expecting the installations to happen for the window-mounted heat pumps in the next few months. But we do have a lot of learnings to share. We've been working really hard on this. We've done a lot of research, and just from the selection and design process, we have a lot of insights about the window-mounted heat pumps. Just wanted to shout out to our project partners here. We've had a lot of funding partners, as well as some technical partners, CACEA and RDH, who are supporting the implementation of the pilots. So why window-mounted heat pumps? Well, we wanted to test out window-mounted heat pumps when we heard about them and saw the pilot in New York City as potentially a quicker, easier, cheaper decarbonization and cooling solution for multi-unit residential buildings. And we know, of course, like, this isn't a silver bullet. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution for every MURB, but having another tool in the toolkit that we can use for this sector that we know is hard to electrify, we see as having a lot of benefits. And we also saw this technology as one that could be good for more of a modular deployment So going kind of suite by suite in a multi-unit residential building, which sometimes works better for landlords, or even doing a single room in every unit in the building to add cooling or to kind of partially electrify within the building's existing electrical capacity. Okay, so what is a window-mounted heat pump exactly? So there's two key brands that came out of the New York City pilot, Gradient and Medea. They're fairly similar, but kind of the key features of this technology is that it's factory sealed. So there's no refrigerant piping, there's no exterior condenser that needs to be mounted on a balcony or roof or outside, which can be a really big challenge for some MURBs depending on the archetype. It can plug into a typical 120 volt unit, and it doesn't require any condensate drainage on the outside of the building. So all the condensate is collected and then turned into a fine mist and sprayed outside of the external unit. There's also no wall penetrations, and the installation can be done in 1 to 2 hours with 2 people. And they don't need to be technical specialists. It can be a handyman and a support person. The units are really heavy, so that's why you need 2 people. They're about 150 pounds, so just maneuvering them and kind of getting them into place is one of the bigger challenges. The challenge with these units is that they are specifically designed for sash windows, so the vertical sliding windows. You can see
French
this
one? 1967 French comedy.
Sorry. Okay, I'm just getting some feedback there. So sorry, I think I got muted then. Sorry. So the units are saddle shape, as you can see, and they fit just over the sill. Oh. Okay, there we go. I think I need to take back control. Okay, apologies. The units are saddle shape, and they fit over the sill of a window. So one part being on the outside, one part being on the inside. And there's a bracket that's kind of mounted on the outside of the building, so they don't need to be permanently affixed, and it comes with some sealing equipment around the window as well. And then one other note is just the Medea units are currently available to the market in Canada. They're selling for about $2,000 a piece, whereas the Gradient units are not currently available in Canada. They're only available in the US, and they're selling for about $4,000. So a bit more expensive. I'm not going to get into all the technical specifications, but this is just to say, like, the Gradient and Medea units perform similar to each other, and they also are performing kind of on par to what we're seeing with a lot of cold climate in-suite mini split systems. So they are kind of a high performance equipment, and the size and ease of installation isn't really cutting into the performance. So as I mentioned, these units were developed through a New York City demonstration project. New York put out a call for this specific configuration of heat pumps and got back the designs from Gradient and Medea. New York has a lot of sash windows, so it made a lot of sense that they would design this particular form. They did their first pilot was fairly limited as well. They did 2 social housing buildings that were steam heated. So they did a total of 24 apartments and 72 window-mounted heat pump units, 36 Medea, 36 Gradient. And they have now done a full season of monitoring, both winter and summer. And they've had really promising results. They've had 87% energy savings and around 50% reduction in heating costs. And they've also had really high rates of user satisfaction. And now they're expanding this pilot to install several thousand more units throughout the state of New York. Okay, so on to our pilot. So our pilot is really small, kind of a bite-sized chunk and a starting place, but we wanted to test out these window-mounted heat pumps in different kind of common MURB archetypes in BC. So we are doing single units in 3 different apartment buildings for a total of 6 of the Medea window-mounted heat pumps across these buildings. So we wanted to test out gas and electric buildings, And we also wanted to test out buildings that did and did not require window replacements. So as a lot of you know, or maybe you're thinking, and it's often the first question we get when we start talking about this project, is that there's not a lot of sash windows in BC. It's not a very common window type. I would estimate it's probably less than 10% of MURBs. So we wanted to see if we could make a replicable and kind of package design where we replace both the window and install a window-mounted heat pump. And so some of the guiding principles are we wanted it to be high performance. Again, we wanted it to be replicable. We wanted to be able to customize it to match different aesthetics and window types. And we wanted it to remain functional if we needed to remove the heat pump for servicing or permanently remove it for any reason. So I don't have a picture of the window design yet as it's not complete, but I did want to show just this picture on the screen as kind of an inspiration image. You can see on the bottom, the window has a kind of panel with some mechanical venting through it. So that's kind of the idea that we're using for our window design. The heat pumps will go into a small panel at the bottom of the window. They'll slot through there and they can be removed through that panel, and the panel can be replaced by glass or an opaque panel, again, if the heat pump needs servicing or needs to be removed. And that allows the top portion of the window to be operable and to use any type of kind of casement, awning, or fixed frame. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to briefly go over the pilot sites that we've selected on our approach. And again, yeah, as I mentioned, the installations have not happened yet, but we have completed the selection and kind of design. So our first one is a New Westminster building. It's a 3-story low-rise wood frame building from 1928. It has central gas hydronic heating, and it also has electric baseboards. So this is kind of a unique building. Their gas system stopped working a number of years ago, so they installed electric baseboards in all the suites and also did some electrical upgrades at the time. And then the gas system started working again, so they switched back to gas. So what that means for us is just that it is a gas building, but the electrical system is ready for electrification. So we're not having to do any kind of major in-suite or building level upgrades. This building is our one sash window building as well, so we're not having to do any type of window replacement here. And we'll be installing 2 window-mounted heat pumps and also 1 small electric baseboard. So the heat pumps will be going in the living room and the bedroom. And then we'll also be doing a small electric baseboard in the kitchen. And that's just because the kitchen window is a little bit smaller than the other window, so it can accommodate the window-mounted heat pump. And the kitchen is enclosed, so it has doors. So we just want to make sure that if the kitchen doors are closed, the oven's not on, that everything remains comfortable. Our Vancouver pilot is another older building. So it's a 4-story, again, wood-framed building from 1906. This building is currently used for student housing. So it's similar to an SRO in that they have micro suites with no bathrooms and no kitchens, just a very small room with a bed and any other belongings. So it's currently heated with a single baseboard, or each unit is currently heated with a single baseboard. So for this building, we're only needing to put in 1 window-mounted heat pump to fully transition the heating system over for the 1 suite. And this building also does have sash windows. You can see the bay windows. The exterior kind of panels are sash, and then the middle one is fixed frame. The exterior ones are a little bit too small, so we're actually going to be replacing the center window as well as putting a heat pump in there, and we'll be doing a suite at the back side of the building. And then our third pilot is in Victoria, and this is another 4-story wood frame building from 1978. It is also an electric heated building, and they currently have double pane vertical sliding windows. And for this building, we're doing a 2-bedroom unit, and we'll be installing 3 window-mounted heat pumps and replacing 3 windows. So 1 heat pump in each bedroom, and then 1 heat pump in the key living space. Okay, so what we've learned so far. So again, we looked at a lot of different buildings before landing on these three. Some owners dropped out, some of them we had to kind of eliminate for different reasons. But we found kind of the most and the least promising archetypes for MURBs are obviously the first one is buildings with sash windows. We know that they're obviously a great fit. They're not a common archetype, but they definitely do exist, and we've seen a lot of them around. So for these buildings, getting window-mounted heat pumps in is a no-brainer. The next one that we think is really promising is kind of the very basic, simple form, low or even mid-rise MURB that needs a window replacement anyways. So this building in the top center, you can see it has single pane windows. It's got a very simple facade. It doesn't have balconies or any kind of obvious place to mount a mini split system. And again, could really benefit from a window replacement. So heat pumps could go in there very easily, or the window mounted heat pumps could go in there very easily. And the building would also get a lot of knock-on benefits from having more efficient windows. The next two examples, so the top right and the bottom left, are buildings that you could maybe do window mounted heat pumps. You could maybe do a partial implementation of window mounted heat pumps, but aren't really as strong of candidates. So you can see the building on the top right. It's got a lot of different shapes of windows. They're kind of unusual. It has some ledges, it has some awnings, and it has balconies. So even if you were to do a window replacement here, you'd probably have some challenges in getting window mounted heat pumps in all the spots that you needed it. And then the other one, which we found actually is quite common, is a lot of the mid-rise MURBs with balconies don't actually have windows in their main living space. They only have sliding balcony doors for light and ventilation, for natural light and ventilation. And you can't put a window mounted heat pump in a sliding balcony door. So that limits your ability to put a window mounted heat pump in the main living space, but again, might be a good solution if you wanted to get one in the bedroom. And then fully glazed towers, it's you'd have to do very significant modifications to get a window mounted heat pump there, and there's just better technologies for that building type. Okay, so the barriers that we found, a lot of these are probably pretty common for a lot of electrification and retrofit projects, but I'll just kind of briefly call them out. So window compatibility, this one is fairly specific to the window mounted heat pumps, but we did find it's not just about a sash window versus a not sash window. You also have to consider things like the window opening, the sill size. So some of the buildings, especially kind of older masonry buildings, we found the sills were too wide to accommodate the window mounted heat pump. And that's just not really something that you could change. As well as balconies, as I mentioned, overhangs, awnings, things like that all need to be considered when you're looking at this technology. Electrical capacity was another one. Again, we just had a presentation on this. Anytime you're looking at a gas heated MURB, electrical capacity is going to come into question. So this technology doesn't avoid that. It's kind of the same challenges, although the benefit here is, again, looking at that modular deployment and seeing if you could do partial implementation within the building's existing electrical capacity. Another challenge we ran into was asbestos. A couple of the MURBs we looked at would need to do asbestos abatement projects before cutting into any walls, which can be a significant undertaking and not something that all landlords are willing to do. And then landlord value proposition. So again, just split incentive came into it for electric heated buildings where the landlord would be paying for the upgrade and the tenant would be benefiting from the reduced utility bills, as well as just the shifting utility costs for gas buildings. And then another one is heritage permitting. This one was interesting because it came into play for both the Vancouver and the New West sites. They're both buildings that are on a heritage registry. And so for these buildings, we're able to do the backside of the building. We're able to install the heat pumps there. But if we were to do the front facade, we might run into some challenges. Okay, so what's next? So as I mentioned, we're scheduled to complete these pilots for March and April 2026. We are going to be publishing some early results through our B2E report, so that should be available again in kind of winter, spring. And then we're also going to do 1 year of post-installation metering to really see how these systems perform both through a cooling and heating season. Some other things we're doing to kind of really look at, and again, like this pilot's pretty limited. Three single suites is not a lot. So we want to continue testing this technology on different buildings. So we do have some funding through the City of Vancouver and Landlord BC's Residential Apartment Retrofit Accelerator to recruit some additional pilot sites. And we also want to start exploring how this technology could be applied in other building stocks. We think there's a lot of potential in both social housing and single family homes. And we want to continue to explore this kind of packaged approach for windows and heat pumps and how this could be made easier, cheaper, and more efficient to install in buildings throughout the province. And then we also want to identify if there's any incentive streams that could be used for this technology. Currently, the incentives aren't applicable for this technology, but we think that that it does fit with a lot of the existing incentive streams. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Maddie. I think this is a really interesting project. It's a technology that I had my eye on for several years, so it's great to see it actually being piloted here in BC. I understand there were maybe a few challenges with like procurement. Do you have any advice for project teams looking to test innovative products such as these in the future? Do you have any lessons learned from that?
Yeah. What would I say the lessons learned are? We reached out really early to a bunch of different people to try to see where we could get the technology. And we did hear back. There was a lot of interest. And then we kind of found out we could get the heat pumps, but it took an extra 6 months from the date we expected them to arrive in Canada to the date that they arrived. I don't know what we could do to really change that. I think just like I would say probably plan for delays. Like these things kind of tend to always take longer. But I would say that generally reaching out, talking to a bunch of different people, letting them know about the pilot, letting them know we were interested in the technology was really beneficial because I think most of these companies are interested in exploring new markets. So are fairly receptive to it. I guess the one other thing I'd say is we talked to Gradient, that company as well, and they were really interested in supporting the pilot and getting their units here, but they didn't have any of the certifications needed to sell their product in Canada. And that we just realized was going to be kind of an insurmountable barrier for the timeline we were working with and the scale of the pilot we were doing. So we kind of have kept in touch with them because I think the product will eventually be coming to Canada and it'd be great to test it out, but not something that we can take on within our scope.
That's totally fair. Oh, Peter, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to say certification challenges are faced by many manufacturers, and that's something that B2E and some of our other groups have been exploring. So just wanted to make a note that it is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, and I think there are options for doing like pilot certifications, kind of one-off, but again, the level of complexity of that felt a little bit daunting.
Yeah, going through Technical Safety BC for their variants, and I'm not sure if that would even apply for a smaller unit like this, so it would be a whole different process. Yeah. Are there any questions in the chat? I'm just looking over right now. Feel free to also raise your hand or connect with Maddie and the team afterwards. Yes, David, see your hand up.
Yeah, Maddie, when I saw the bay windows, because we're working with a member who does secondary windows, and literally it's acrylic panels recommended by NRCan, but people though they just put the saran wrap and a two-way tape and a hairdryer. Putting a heat pump in windows that are poor is, original single pane is still going to make the heat and cooling loss still there. So I would say, when I heard you say replace the window, well, we're looking at the cost of new windows that are extreme. Like it's unbelievable. It's 3 times the price. If you can turn that window into a triple pane window or equivalent. So I will reach out to you and show you the product. And they just got a coating that can be applied to these that has low emissivity. So it helps both in cooling and in heat reduction.
Okay. So you're talking about like an addition to an existing window that.
Yeah, it's a magnetic panel that's been around for over 20 years, but people thought, well, it's too expensive and windows don't pay off, but it's very specific to how much it costs versus how much you're going to save.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll be in touch.
I think it's interesting though, the window mounted heat pump piece, like you're not doing a building penetration with this. Like when you do a window replacement, there's no building penetration. So I think that's like one of the benefits of this approach too.
I will tell you, we've been around, there's so many sliding windows, where it just slides open and somebody buys a $190 air conditioner at Loblaws and they put it in and then they put a piece of cardboard for the rest, and yet they're wasting their money because people don't know, right? It's a window air conditioner.
And that's the interesting thing about this technology too. Like we're obviously going through all the steps to make sure we're following code, designing it properly, getting them in there properly sealed. But this technology is something that I could go buy off the shelf. And if I had someone to help me put it into my apartment building, plug it in and see what happens. So yeah,
and we have landlords who charge that extra $50 if you even plug in your air conditioner.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thanks so much. I'll be in touch.
And then that goes back to the first presentation that we had today about right to cooling and those the safe indoor temperatures. So it's a nice full circle moment there.
Yeah. And thank you, Maddie, for your presentation and the work that you've done on your project. Thank you to those that participated in the chat. I'll be handing over back to Mariko to close us out here. And Victoria, if you could just flash up perhaps the exit survey as we close out.
Thanks, Peter. All right. So for those of you who are not already a member of B2E, I just wanted to let you know that joining is simple and it's free. So if you go to our Get Started page on our website, or Get Involved page on the website, you can just click that button, join B2E, fill out a form, send us your logo, and you're all done. So you would have access to future funding calls. Now we don't have one lined up at the moment, but letting you know that this is kind of a seed to here's how projects have gone in the past, and we may have other opportunities in the future. So I just wanted you to have all of this information with you so that you could continue. And then I also wanted to let you know that we will have an event coming up in October. So we're looking at B2E is actually, it's going to be a 5-year anniversary for B2E in the fall. And so we're wanting to celebrate that by hosting a 1-day event, a symposium, where we all can gather together and learn, connect, and network to celebrate our successes and talk about how far we've come. We're also launching a update to the building electrification roadmap this year, so we can talk about pathways where we're headed in the future. So I hope, well, we don't quite have a save the date yet, but I wanted you to put that on your radar because I'd love to see a lot of you at that event. We'll also be hosting an awards ceremony on that day too, so stay tuned for more information on that. And with that, I wanted to take another moment to thank our presenters. The work that they put into their projects is incredibly valuable to advancing electrification in our province. And we covered a whole bunch of different aspects, from policy research to pilot projects, and in, we're looking at different technologies, we're looking at load management, we're looking at new heat pump tech. So it's been a really, really great learning opportunity for us at B2E to see all of these projects go forward as well. So thank you to all of the project teams for undertaking this work. Thank you to all of our presenters today. And then thank you to all of you for joining us. So hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.